Uh,
How are you?
I'm good. Oh, yeah. I thought for a moment that it was at 5 and I was late or something, but no.
So what time is it for you over there?
It's going to be 6. I'm in Dublin.
Gotcha. Excellent.
Uh,
How are you?
I'm good. Oh, yeah. I thought for a moment that it was at 5 and I was late or something, but no.
So what time is it? Okay.
Okay, so let me see about the sharing of the screen.
Oh,
Can you
yeah, let
activate
me,
that?
absolutely. There we go. Should be able to do that now.
Right.
If it makes you feel better at all, I totally thought I was off too, and I'm only like 2 time zones away. So
Yeah, I noticed you've been here for a little while.
I was in the Jonathan Flowers talk and decided to make a pot of coffee and just hopped in here before it started. It was like, okay, you know what? By the time I'm done, this will be ready. And then coffee takes a lot shorter to make than I realized.
Excellent. We're glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's been fun so far. I'll have to admit I'm a bit of a tourist as I'm an archaeologist, but you know, I think it's important to study, even if it's just tangentially, as many disciplines as possible. And at the very least, this talk is halfway, anthropologically related, since it seems to be about linguistics in a bit, unless I'm totally misunderstanding what what the abstract was.
No, um, it is very abstract linguistics. It's semantics. So yeah,
All right,
there's
yeah,
a bit of that.
yeah. Then I'm really excited since sign symbols and whatnot are really really big in anthropology, and at least a lot of like the foundational work of anthropology.
Cool. Just let me check if I can. So I'm very bad at this thing called technology. So let me see if I can share. Uh, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. Okay, share. Am I sharing my screen?
I don't think
Not
you
yet.
are.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, I need to leave the meeting and then so I can give access for yeah. I'm gonna be back in a minute.
Okay, great.
Am I in the right room for Eduardo's?
Yes. He stepped out for a moment. He'll be right back.
Okay, let me see. It works now. Oh my God. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Yep.
Nice. Okay. And you can you still see my face or not?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when you share your screen, it ends up it minimizes the videos to everybody else's screen too.
Okay. Great. So yeah, I think that should do.
Sorry, 1 second here. Okay,
Come
sorry
on.
about that. The mail carrier came by, and my dog is a stereotype.
Okay, my boyfriend is dragging me because I don't have my pronouns. 1 second. Okay. Okay, I hope he's content now.
Okay. Well, I think we can probably get started here. So welcome to the second set of sessions, I guess, for the Cogquito workshop. I will be chairing in a sort of unofficial capacity. So the way that these are set up, we'll give you roughly 15 minutes or so to talk us through some of your research, and then we'll just kind of open it up for discussion, and it should be relatively informal. So I won't, unless you have very strong feelings about this, Eduardo, I won't insist that people raise their hands or that I somehow navigate questions that way. This can be kind of a more free-flowing sort of a thing. But if you'd prefer, I'd be happy to moderate. So
Yeah.
we can.
We can go with the flow, I think.
Great, sounds wonderful. Great. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Eduardo Torres, PhD student at Trinity College Dublin, who's going to be talking to us today about playing with monsters, introducing character operators into the English language. So take it away, Eduardo.
Thank you, and thank you all of you for being here. So I'm gonna start talking about monsters. So I know it sounds very cool. It's probably the coolest part about this research is maybe just the title. It's a very cool title, Playing with Monsters. I don't know how many of you are familiar with character operators, sometimes called in bad faith semantic monsters. But I'm just gonna give a little introduction to what these monsters are. And okay, so yeah, I made this short presentation in which I'm arguing the point of my research of this paper that I wrote. It's to argue against two claims that David Kaplan, which is a famous semanticist, made in the 70s. He said that there are no character operators in natural languages and that they could not be added to, at least to English, that English cannot have such operators. These are linguistic devices, linguistic operators that I will describe later. So the presentation is divided in three sections. First, I'm going to tell you what a monster, a Kaplanian monster is, and then I'm going to explain why we don't like these monsters, why we are afraid of these monsters. And then I'm going to show you that it is possible to play with these monsters and to bring them into the English language. So I'm going to start with it. The basic distinction here to understand what a monster is this this distinction that was established by Kaplan of character and content. So he thinks that, and it has become sort of a canonical distinction, that meaning is twofolded. It has two dimensions. One is character, and the other is content. So the content of let's say any expression or an expression of natural language has these two levels of meaning. The first one would be character, and the second one would be content. Content would be, one can think of content as the meaning of an utterance or the proposition that is made by that is expressed by an assertion. And of character, one can think that it's like the lexical meaning of a word. It's what you would find in a dictionary. I have this little diagram here, and that's, we need to think of the notion of character and the notion of content as functions. So the character is a function in which you give it a context, you fit it a context, and it would give you a content, which is a proposition, a meaning. And to that function, the content function, you can give it a circumstance of evaluation, and it can give you an extension or a denotation. In the case of a sentence, it will give you a truth value. So this is how it is connected. So you get from character, you have the character, you set it in a context, and that would give you a content. And the content you evaluate it according to a certain circumstance, and it will tell you, it will give you either an extension if it's a referential expression, or a truth value if it's a whole sentence, if it's a proposition. It's important to remark here that in his work on demonstratives, which is why Kaplan is so famous because of his work on demonstratives, he presents two principles that are very important to his view. Principle number one, that says that the referent of a pure indexical depends on the context, and the referent of a demonstrative depends on the associated demonstration. So these words that we're interested in are indexicals. Indexicals are those parts of the language that somehow depend on context to be meaningful. Words like now, like here, there, tomorrow, yesterday, today, pronouns are, you, he. It seems that those words don't have a fixed meaning. The meaning of those words depends on the context of utterance. So if I say today, it's the 30th of, it means the 30th of January 2021. But had I said today, yesterday, then it would have been the 29th of January. When I say I, it means Eduardo, but when someone else's say I, it means the person who says, like, so the connection between the pronoun I and the meaning of the pronoun is the person who says it, the person who utters that pronoun. So these are tricky words because they depend on context. The second principle here, which is very important, is that it seems that these words, these indexicals, pure indexicals, are directly referential in the sense that they refer to something. They, for example, here refers to a place, now refers to a time, I refers to a person, and you also refers to a person. And they are directly referential, which is not to be, it's not the same as a rigid designator. It's not the same. Directly referential means that they refer without any mediation. They go, if you understand the word, it takes you directly to the thing that it's picking up, to the thing that it's referring. It's not like a like a description that you need to understand the description in order to know what it's picking up, what it's pointing to. And these words, it may lack, for example, the word "I" lacks any descriptive content. There's like a sense, in a way, it's just transparent. It just points to the person who's saying it, who's using that word. And that seems to be an intuitive principle, something that we all can agree with. That's how indexicals behave. I'm going to give a quick example. So there's this sentence: "I am a philosophy student," which has an indexical. In the case, the indexical is I. I'm not. There are some views, and some people might consider that tense in natural language, it's also a form of indexicals, but I'm not dealing with tense right now. I'm just considering the basic, the common indexicals. In this case, it would be I. Since this sentence has an indexical, it has no fixed character. In order to know exactly what that sentence means, we need to put it in a context, because it could have different meanings in different contexts. If it's when it's uttered by me, because I am a philosophy student, the sentence expresses a true proposition. It is a true sentence. But if it was uttered, for example, by my boyfriend, who is a political scientist, then it comes out as a false sentence because he's not a philosophy student. So this is how we know that a same expression, one expression with one character, can have different contents. So we have two different contents for one and the same expression, and we can have a variety of different contents because it depends on context. In contrast, we can think of a sentence with a fixed character. And for example, we have Arvo Pärt is the author of Fratres, which apparently has no indexicals. Again, I'm not considering in the present work, I'm not considering tense as an indexical. So it seems that the meaning of this sentence is fixed. It doesn't matter the context. It's always going to express the same proposition. The proposition that the author of Arvo Pärt is the author of Fratres is Arvo Pärt. It doesn't matter who says it, and it doesn't matter in where or when. It might be false, of course, in a possible world, but that's another paper. Now we get to the scary part. Well, it's not scary. It's just I just like to be dramatic. I don't know why he came up with this name, but it's very cool. Kaplan thinks that at the level of content, there are operators that modify, like tweak content, like modal operators. Words like necessarily, possibly, should, may. These models affect or change the proposition. But they work at the level of content. They work at the level of meaning once it's already defined in a particular context. He thinks that there cannot be, and they are not, operators that affect or change character. He says that such things, if there were such things, they would be monsters. So that's why he calls them monsters. He refers to them as monsters beget by elegance. His idea is that they are no part of natural language, but we could develop them in artificial languages. They're easy to make in formal systems, logic, in semantic models. We can make sense of them and we can create those monsters, but they are not right. Like they're not out there in human speech. Like regular people don't use them. They don't exist. This is a brief example. Again, the the sentence, I am not a philosophy student, but now let's say that I have this operator, the M operator, the monster operator, that says, in some contexts, it is true that I'm not a philosophy student. So for that sentence to be true, it just needs anyone, like in any context that is not a philosophy student for the sentence to be true. Mm-hmm. So that sentence, as it is, it comes out as true, because it just needs whoever not being a philosophy student. The problem here is that if that was a monster, if the operator in some contexts was really a monster, it would violate this view of indexicals that we already established. Because the I in that sentence, in the prior sentence, the I in I am not a philosophy student, would not refer to the people uttering it. If I am saying, in some context, it is true that I'm not a philosophy student, the I in that sentence doesn't refer to me. It has nothing to do with me. It can refer to others, but not to me. Or it refers simultaneously to me and to others. So it makes things very messy. And as we have seen in Kaplan's theory, which is sort of a basic theory of semantics, indexicals have to refer to some aspect of the context. And in that sentence, it seems that it's referring to me. I am the I in that sentence, because I'm the one uttering that sentence. So I presented this for people who are more familiar with formal semantics and lambda calculus, but we can just move forward. There's no need to stay here for long, in case of just for you who are not that familiar with the technicalities of formal semantics. There's just this way that if it were a monster, if it was actually a monster, the operator in some context, it is true, would work in a way that would alter a parameter of the context. As we can see it here, we have a world we have the context and the world of evaluation. And what it says is that the monster and of sentence A would be true even only if, for all worlds that belong to the set of worlds, the world of the world of the context is the same as the world of circumstance. And that's very problematic, because it leads to a violation of the principle of compositionality. The principle of compositionality is this, I would say it's the primary principle behind compositional semantics. It's called compositional semantics because of this. The idea of the principle of compositionality is that we are capable of understanding and producing an infinity of sentences in natural language, because they can be formed in a compositional way, in the sense that the meaning of the part makes the meaning, and the way it's structured makes the meaning of the whole. And this is a basic principle of semantics. So we take it that it's the starting point for most formal semantics. The problem here is that, and I'm presenting it with two sentences. We have sentence A, I am not a philosophy student, and sentence B, Eduardo is not a philosophy student. It seems that, of course, they have different character. In sentence A, there's an I, and in sentence B, there's Eduardo. But if they are uttered in the same context, in this context, if I utter A and I utter B, they have to share the same content. And that's the false proposition that I am not a philosophy student. It is false because I am a philosophy student. And it has the same content because the I in sentence A refers to me, and the name Eduardo in sentence B also refers to me. So they have the same content, but there are two different sentences with two different characters. And the idea behind the principle of compositionality is that they have the same meaning, they have the same content, because the semantic value of the constituents of sentence A is the same as the semantic value of the constituents of sentence B. And because the semantic value of the parts conveys, with the way it's put together, conveys the semantic value of the wholes. It has the same, every word in those sentences has the same meaning, therefore both sentences have the same meaning. But now let's see what happens if the operator in some context it is true, it's actually a monster. So we have sentence A2 and B2. In some context it is true that I am not a philosophy student, and sentence B2, in some context it is true that Eduardo is not a philosophy student. Again, they have different character, but also, and this is what the difference is important, they have different contents, because A2 can express a true proposition, while B2 doesn't express a true proposition. The sentence B2 says, in some context, it is true that Eduardo is not a philosophy student. I mean, yeah, when you think about it, it might be in some context it is not true. But let's say that we're talking about, it's a weird example, but the idea is that we can put it in another example, but the idea is that the I in sentence A, because of the presence of the operator, doesn't necessarily refer to the person who's uttering it. It just needs any person in any context to satisfy that for not being a philosophy student, to make that proposition true. I mean, that sentence true, and therefore the true proposition. So this is how we can see that monsters break compositionality, and that is why they're monsters. That's why we don't like them, because if monsters were real, they would break the beginning or the foundation of most of semantics. But here's the thing. Kaplan says, okay, that might look like a monster. It seems to be a monster, but they cannot be any monsters. They are not. They just look like it. They are actually not real. He would say that the original sentences A and B, I am not a philosophy student, and Eduardo is not a philosophy student. Those are expressions, yeah, of natural language. But these two, A2 and B2, are not. And they are expressions of meta language, of a language we use to speak about language. So what we're actually doing when using operators like in some context it is true, is putting like invisible quotation marks into the sentence. So we can actually, the real form of sentence A2 and B2 would be something like A3 and B3. In some cases, quote, I am not a philosophy student, end of the quote, is true. And in some cases, quote, Eduardo is not a philosophy student, end of the quote, is true. So we are saying that we're mentioning a sentence, we're not using it. And that's how they're not really messing with, they're not really breaking compositionality. They're just metalinguistic devices. Devices that we use to speak about parts of the language. So we might, I agree with Kaplan, and I would say that what he thinks is a monster is actually not a monster. We can say that, yeah, that is not a monster. It looks like one, but there is no, it is not a monster. And what he thinks that we can create these monsters, and we can use them at a meta language level. But his idea goes a bit further than that, and he makes this. It's not an empirical assertion, but it has a certain empirical force. He says that they are nowhere to be found in natural language, and they could not be brought into natural language. I'm saying, to be more explicit about this, they are nowhere to be found among non-theory laden natural language communities. That is, communities of ordinary speakers that are not engaged in linguistic or philosophical inquiry. just regular everyday people who are still very competent speakers of a language. The perfect example would be children. Children would not have monsters. They would not create monsters. They would not use monsters. Yeah, people who work on language, linguists, logicians, philosophers, they can come up with monsters, but they are not natural things. They are artificial creations. But then, ta-da, comes this monster, this little sherry bottle monster. So there's a common children's language game in Mexico that actually involves the use and mastery of a character operator. The game goes very much like this. You have to imagine two children. And let's say the one is a bit older than the other. One is just a bit smarter, more cunning than the other. And so this older one tries to mock the younger one, and he teaches him a game. This is the word game. In Spanish, I'm just going to use this time the original version in Spanish, botellita de Jerez, todo lo que digas será al revés, which can be roughly translated as little sherry bottle, everything you say will be backwards. The idea behind this is that by invoking this spell, this incantation, the speaker changes the meaning of her following expression, of the expression that she says right after saying little sherry bottle. For matters of simplicity, let's say that this is the whole thing, that this is the whole like sentence, but they don't use the whole sentence. They just say sherry bottle, like little sherry bottle, and then they say something afterwards. And then the meaning of the word of the sentence that is uttered right after little sherry bottle is altered, is changed. And it is changed in the way that the meanings of the words I and you are switched. So the referent of I becomes you, the referent of you, and the referent of you becomes the referent of I. Mm-hmm. It switches that. This is a brief formalization of it. I'm adding here as a parameter of the context an addressee. So it's the world, the speaker, and the addressee. The original, this parameter, the parameter of the addressee, doesn't appear in Kaplanian semantics, but it doesn't mean that we cannot add it. We can add very different parameters to a contextual setting. Now let's see that we have this new parameter of the addressee to correspond to the referent of the pronoun you. And now I'm going to show you what these savage children do. The older kid, Pedrito, understands very well how this works. Even though, of course, he has no idea of what two-dimensional semantics is. But the aim of the game is that you're mocking someone, you're making fun of someone, you're insulting someone. This is part of a longer, older social anthropological, I don't know how to put it, tradition in Mexico, which is called albur, which is this very refined art of insulting someone without him noticing and using very scatological and sort of pornographic innuendos. So let's say that this is like the suitable for children version of albur. This is what the little children start doing, and then when they grow older, they go to the full of nasty version of albur. So let's say that Pedrito, this little boy, says, little sherry bottle, I am an idiot. And he says that to Juanito. But because Juanito doesn't really understand what Pedrito is doing, he thinks that Pedrito himself is calling himself an idiot. But what Pedrito is doing is calling Juanito an idiot, because the I it's not referring to the person who's speaking, but to the addressee of the person who's speaking. So what what Pedrito is actually saying is, you are an idiot. Mm-hmm. That's the whole goal of the game. They start saying these sentences, and then at some point one of them would fail to realize the real meaning, and either he would feel insulted or he will fail to come back, to reply, to keep the game. And that's the whole point. So it's a game about mental agility and verbal agility, so that you keep sort of insulting each other in a verbal duel, and being capable of grasping the different twists in the meaning, so that you know at some point someone is going to miss something, someone is going to fail to use it properly, someone is going to insult himself or something like that. That's the whole point. And so I now, just for matters of formality, I'm going to give this brief argument of why this monster is actually a monster. This is not an apparent monster. This is actually a monster. Let's say that we have these three parameters: world, addressee, and speaker. Mm-hmm. And let's say that the speaker it's Eduardo, and the addressee is you, whoever is my audience. The ad refers to the actual world, this world. And let's suppose that I'm not happy, but you, people listening to me, you're happy. You're happy because you're listening to me. So we have these two sentences. Twist. I'm using for sake of simplicity, instead of using the whole little cherry bottle thing, I use I call it the twist operator. So twist, I am happy, has a different meaning than twist, Eduardo is happy, because twist, I am happy actually says twist, whoever is my addressee is happy. But B says twist, Eduardo is happy, and the twist operator doesn't affect that meaning, because there's no indexical there. There's no I, there's no you. So that remains the same meaning. It says Eduardo is happy. Mm-hmm. Since the truth values of A and B are different, the former being true while the later being false, we can say that they have different contents. Mm-hmm. And the content, because the content contribution of the I in A and the content contribution of Eduardo in B are different. But then I am happy without, like, if you have those content, if you have those expressions without the operator, you will see that they express the same proposition. They are the same proposition. I am happy and Eduardo is happy, as uttered by me. They are the same. But when you put the twist operator, when you put the sherry bottle operator, they're not the same anymore, even though they have exactly the same constituents. They have exactly the same words with the same meanings. Mm-hmm. Maybe not exactly the same words, because in one there's an I and the other one is Eduardo. But those words, even though different, they have the same semantic value. They mean the same. But when you put in the monster, when you say sherry bottle monster, little sherry bottle at the beginning, then it breaks compositionality. And therefore, we see how the twist operator violates the compositionality of meaning exactly like a monster would. For this reason, it looks like our boys are using a very elegant monster to subtly make fun of each other. Why do they do this? Because Mexican kids are savage enough as to prove Kaplan wrong. And that was my presentation. I'm gonna stop. No, I'm gonna keep sharing just in case you guys want to go back to. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that.
I'm sorry, I went like 10 minutes over, but.
Oh no, that's quite all right. So it's a very interesting talk. So anyone who'd be interested in jumping in, please feel free. Okay. Both hands seem to have gone up simultaneously. I didn't quite catch who was first.
Go ahead, Devin.
I don't know how can I see your faces anymore.
Also, if, in the participant screen, it actually says, it actually will have the hands in the order that they were raised. But anyway, so I think this is very interesting. I think this is a very cool example. So the pushback I could imagine, it was sort of my sort of immediate reaction was something like, oh, well, what's going on here is that this little sherry bottle thing is introducing a new language, essentially.
Oh,
Right.
no, I didn't get to, sorry, I didn't get to that, to mention it explicitly. But the idea is that since we can formalize the semantics for this, and since it makes sense in the English language, we can imagine it is possible to think that we can teach English-speaking children to play this game, and they would be capable of doing. There's nothing that stops children to play it. There's nothing that makes it, the game itself makes sense in English, and it makes sense in many other languages. So his claim was specifically that there's no way of introducing such operators into the English language. He wasn't he was humble enough to speak only about English. But we need to think that his claim was, in order to be a strong philosophical claim, it's not really a claim about English. It's a claim about any natural language. But the idea is that if you find these monsters in other languages, then there are monsters. And in this case, in this particular case, we can use them in English. We can see there's no reason to believe that English-speaking children cannot have fun and play this game in a way that's completely significant and meaningful.
Yeah, so to be clear, I wasn't talking about the difference between English and Spanish. I was saying that my intuitive thought on first encountering this is like, oh, what happens when you say little sherry bottle is you're saying it's like saying today is opposite day. Like what I'm saying is everything I'm saying from now on is no longer in Spanish. It's in like this transformation of Spanish where what it actually is this language where I picks out the addressee, you picks out, right? It's saying I'm now going to speak a language where the characters of these words are different.
Yeah.
Which formally would be something like it's like a quotation, right? So it's like an operator. It's saying like the following quoted sentence is in, anti-Spanish or something. That's what the little sherry bottle isn't actually a monster operator. It's doing something like that. I don't know that that's right, but I'm just saying that like with the sort of my immediate response of what I wanted to say. So I just wanted to present that way that someone might push back and see what your reply would be.
Yeah, I do consider that claim that people can say that it's just a new language, that it's not really the same language. It becomes a new language. And 1 second. And I have this idea. So imagine that.
Yeah.
So if it was actually a new language, then the way in which, so the characters would change and the contents would change of these specific expressions.
Yeah.
But you can think if it was a new language and it was a quotation device, then the fact that only the presence of these two particular indexicals are affected by it makes it more it's a simpler explanation to think that there's something monstrous there.
Mhm.
That to posit,
Mhm.
for example, a syntactical device, because that would involve thinking about an infinity of syntactic types that correspond to all different sort of expressions,
Mhm.
not only semantic types, but also syntactic types, and that would allow you to make the substitution between syntactic types of the same category. So the monstrous explanation is the most simple, elegant explanation, without positing that the children are making a whole new language. Because I have a whole argument, but it's against the accusation that it's a new language, but I don't think we can cover it fully here. But I could show it to you. I could send it to you on like later or something if you're interested.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Can someone tell me how can I see you?
The
I don't know how
simplest
to...
thing might be to stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
That should. There are buttons you can push to make things overlay, but that'll probably be the easiest way.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and then... Yeah, I'm seeing you again. Sorry.
Great. There we go. I think, Jonathan, you're up next.
Okay, cool. Thanks. This was fun. I really enjoyed sort of thinking this through. So this is a question about. So I'm thinking about like whether we should think of this of this game as actually involving something like a monster, or the alternative hypothesis I'm thinking of is that it's doing something more like the kind of Kaplanian, there's invisible quotes and people are, and it's a more linguistic thing. So one of the tests, I'm not sure whether this is a good test or not, but I'm actually whether or not it is, I'm interested in like whether it passes it, is whether you could do this trick kind of without just sticking it at the beginning of the sentence and have the whole thing following it, or whether you can put it in various kinds of embeddings. So so here's
you can.
Let me give you just a couple some more specific questions. So here's a situation. This is a true situation. I, Jonathan, hope that you, Eduardo, think that I, Jonathan, am asking a good question. That's the situation that that's actually true. But let's one question is, could I express that thought? And I'll use the chat to help me so we can look at it here too, just so we have it together. Can I say, I hope, Sherry Bottle, I think you're asking a good question? And then if so, could it be like, could we make it even more complicated and do it a second time? I hope, Sherry Bottle, I think, Sherry Bottle, I'm asking a good question.
Yeah, it can be iterated, and the whole point of the game of these children is that it becomes so complex and so hard to read that at some point someone is going to lose it, and someone is going to be like, what did you say? What are you trying to say? And the one who doesn't get the meaning, or the one who fails to come with a reply, it's the one who loses. That's the whole point of the game, to be
That's
more cool. To be faster, to be more agile, mentally agile with meanings. It's a very Mexican thing, and it's common, as I said, it gets a nasty version for all, like not suitable for work version, but this is like this the one for children. And I was very surprised when I thought that no one had thought about this. And there's other languages that have something similar, but it is not made as a game. It's like the opposite day, or like in Russian you have an expression that is also used like a shield. Like in English you can say something like something about glue and being stuck to. Yeah, I don't remember what the exact expression. But there's these things in different languages that are used by children. But in this particular Mexican context, it is taken to the whole level of a game, of someone engaging in a duel.
No, that's interesting. And I think that actually might be a big difference between this kind of case and some of the others. Because if you have a game where you just say, where there's this practice that just says, whatever you're about to say is false. That's not doing that. There's nothing like monstrous or linguistic about that. That's just a kind of preemption. But your case is cool because if it does work in this kind of embedded sort of way, that really does suggest that it's kind of messing with the character a little bit more. Then again, in Defense of Kaplan, like the fact that this game is hard might mean not that he's right that it's impossible to do this in a natural language, but that there's like a really good reason not to.
Yeah, but these are children. So if it was, a bunch of philosophy students that came up with this, I would say, yeah, Kaplan is right. But this is something that I was, and I've seen people that I was doing when I wasn't very good at it, sadly. When I was, I don't know, 6, 7, and you can still see children doing it. And it can be embedded. So because you can embed it right exactly as an operator, as negation, or as any other form of operator, it strongly suggests that it behaves like an operator, not like a metalinguistic device. So I can see the three basic objections to it. The first one is that it is not an operator, that it's a metalinguistic device, that it's just quotation. And my response is, because we can embed it and iterate it in the embeddings, I would say that I would strongly argue that it is not a metalinguistic device. And also, it is not a pragmatic thing. It isn't. It belongs to the realm of semantics, because you cannot cancel it. The proof of the test of cancellation doesn't really apply here. Imagine this.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you got me wrong. I'm totally on board with all that you're saying here. I'm convinced by that. The only question that I'm pressing is like whether this is really like opposed to Kaplan talking about ordinary speakers versus those engaged in linguistic or philosophical inquiry. My thought is that maybe these are kids who are engaged in linguistic inquiry.
Oh, I haven't thought about it, but maybe. But then what are we doing if children are doing it better than us?
I mean, they started practicing earlier. Probably if we kept up with the game. Probably you're good at this game if you played it as a child. One can learn it. But it doesn't. I'm sort of with Kaplan that it doesn't feel particularly natural. And the fact that like kids kind of make it hard. Like regular indexicals and content operators and the like, they're not that hard to follow.
No, and I think the danger of a monster is precisely that it would make comprehension too gray, like dark. You would need to, but it also goes with certain, and something that fascinates me about Mexican like speech and linguistic conventions. There's this tendency to obscure things, to make it hard to understand. And I think that's also a part, like a natural part of natural language. I think we're idealizing the sort of pragmatic principles of cooperation and all these things too much. Sometimes we enjoy not making ourselves accessible and being hard to understood. I mean, as philosophers, we should know that if someone is good at it, it's us.
Interesting. Thanks.
Enjoying not being understood.
Taylor, you'd had your hand up for a little while. Do you still want to ask a question?
No, because he literally used the example I was going to ask about. So.
Gotcha.
It was the rubber and glue?
Yeah. I was just going to ask, like, would this be the same thing if you had two English-speaking kids who were sticking to that as a similar game? But
it is like, let's say, in principle, it's the same idea, but it's not taking the complexity that you can find in the game. It is not a game. It's used as a shield. It just reverses what you say, but you are not supposed to come back to counterattack to that. And it's the interaction, the counterattack, that makes it work as it works.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I think Devin had his hand up first and then took it down.
Yeah, because I had already asked a question, so I wanted to go.
Sure. Okay. AG.
Thank you. And thank you, Eduardo, for this talk. This is really interesting. I was actually thinking more about the pragmatic applications, or like the pragmatic side of it that you were starting to get into. So I'm wondering if you could maybe say a little bit more about the cancellation test, because I think it's really interesting to think of this as like a language game where the success condition is like forcing a failure of speaker uptake, and that's how you win. But the if you can't cancel sherry bottle, you can't say not sherry bottle. You say sherry bottle. Does that work, or is that
sherry bottle would like not cancel it, but would like nullify it, like it would.
That's interesting.
But like, for example, check this. So I'm just gonna read the definition of what a cancellation is. So a putative conversational implicature that P is explicitly cancelable if, to the form of words, the utterance of which putatively implicates that P, it is admissible to add, but not P. I mean, like this, but not that. I do not mean to imply that P. So if you say that and it cancels it, that's a test of cancellation. So imagine that we have something like little cherry bottle. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. However, I am not saying that I am the best thing that ever happened to you. And the reaction is like, in this context, these children, the child would say, no, yes, idiot, that's exactly what you're saying. Like, the point is that you're insulting me. You cannot just say that you are not, because you are. You cannot cancel it. If you say you are the best thing that ever happened, tweet like little sherry bottle, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. That's one sentence. And then you say, but I'm not meaning that I am the best thing that ever happened to you. Then the smart child is supposed to answer, no, you are a scoundrel. Like, you actually mean that you are the best thing that happened to me, not I to you. Mm-hmm. So that's why you cannot cancel it. If you could cancel it, then the game wouldn't have a point, because the idea is that you are actually, you're not saying that, but you're saying it. You say, like, you're using different words, but you're actually meaning something different. And that's why, and that was my response in order to keep it in the realm of semantics, because the putative monsters can always be dismissed as pragmatic things. It could be a presupposition trigger. It could be an implicature, a conversational implicature, or something like that. Which I thought for a moment, I thought it was that, but then the cancellation test doesn't really work for this.
Devin?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is I think it might be worth thinking some more about Jonathan's point as to whether this really is against what Kaplan was saying when he says that there aren't any indexicals, for exactly the reason that this might be children doing something that's very similar to what philosophers do when they come up with formal systems that have monstrous operators. So I think the fact that this is in a context of a game is probably important to that degree. Also the fact that like children find indexicals very interesting and like engage in metalinguistic reflection about indexicals because it's something that they find puzzling and peculiar. And so I think I just wanted to say that. I was also curious if you could speak a little more about the embedding argument and how that shows that this isn't some sort of metalinguistic operator, because, you know, I could say something like, it is false that, quote, it is false that, quote, inside the quote, and then say something, and thereby by assert, the content and the thing that's in the smallest quoted segment. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how that argument works.
Yeah. So first, I think the strongest objection to this would be that, that what children are doing is actually elegant. It's actually very sophisticated, and it wouldn't count as a natural or basic part of natural language. And then we have, if that's the case, then we would have to concede that these children are actually brilliant and are doing very important and interesting linguistic reflection. Well, okay, I'm okay. Let's be just, like make justice to them. But we can also, I don't know how to defend the view that, because I'm not against the idea that actually children might be doing something very sophisticated. But intuitively, it seems that children are the standard of competent speakers, just like regular, everyday, basic competent speakers of a language. Going to the argument of embedding, let's say that, for example, you have a sentence like this. I'm going to put it on the chat. Everyone thinks that little sherry bottle, I am a fool. Mm-hmm. So if I say everyone thinks that, it's not had, is that? Where is it? Little sherry bottle, I am a fool. It's supposed to mean everyone thinks that you are a fool, right? That's the content of that expression. Everyone thinks that you are a fool. If we were using quotation marks, actually, then we would have something like everyone thinks, 1 second. Everyone thinks that little sherry bottle, I am, 1 second. A fool. But if we have that, then the quantifier cannot break into the quotation. And the quantifier would end up giving us a reading that says that everyone thinks everyone is a fool. It's because it would say everyone thinks that little sherry bottle, but since it would, the quantifier cannot break into the quotes. Or it would give us a different reading if we think of it as having quotations. You see?
Right.
And that's
really obvious too. If you had like everyone thinks little sherry bottle, you are a fool.
Yeah.
Where I'm assuming there's no reading of that where everyone thinks they're a fool, which is what it would strictly be if it was a metalinguistic device.
Yeah. There was more argument to say that it's not quotation.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I just want to push back on the point about children's sophistication that I think, and I'd have to come up with actual examples, but I think in a lot of ways, because there are people who are sort of in the process of becoming knowledgeable in the language, children often are actually very meta-linguistically sensitive, and often more so than adults.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the best philosophical questions usually come from children.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely see the point here. Yeah, this is really
Uh,
cool.
As a point, like just as a disclaimer, I want to preserve Kaplanian semantics. It's a very elegant system. It makes so much sense. So I just want to make sense of what these children are doing, and maybe on an overall project that it's more what I'm doing now on my PhD. Try to come up with a less, let's say, strict notion of context and accommodation, so that we can make sense of. It's all in this very thin line between pragmatics and semantics. That it seems that by doing semantics, you want to capture a very fixed notion of context, and as if would as in a way that I don't think speakers, not everyday speakers, actually do. There's so much flexibility in the way we speak and the way we're still understandable, the way we twist meanings, the way all these semantic deviations that we fall into. They might be semantic deviations, but we need to account for them, not just dismiss them as the weird behavior, as the queer thing. But maybe, it's all going back to non-ideal theories of language and trying to put up a notion of accommodation and context that is not as strict and as limited as it has been from Kaplan, for example.
Okay. Well, let's take that as an opportunity to thank Eduardo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have meeting room A is still open for the next hour, just sort of as a break. So feel free to pop in there and continue discussions or chat with other folks as well. And then also in in an hour, we're going to have our plenary, 2 hours, we're going to have our plenary session. Looking forward to that. It's going to be a really exciting talk about Mary Shepard. So really great work. Thank you all for joining, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you all for listening to my talk, and I apologize for my incompetence with technology, but I'm glad that you started playing with monsters now. Hope to see you on